Hello, everyone. Bront, CatHerder here. We're having some fun talking Raid Shadow Legends, and Raid just dropped a update preview on Hydra, Trunda, and Shields. We have buffs, we have nerfs, we have all kinds of fun stuff happening here. Let's react to it. All right, so Raid Bro, take it away. Tell us what you have changed.
Hey everyone, we've got a different kind of update preview for you today. We're showing off some balanced changes coming to the Hydra, and a few other areas of the game. Along the way, we'll explain why we're making these changes, but here's a quick overview. The current meta is way too limiting to players who don't have specific champions in their collection. We want you to experiment with different tactics and teams, switching things up each week. Let's dive in and take a closer look at what's coming. First up, we're setting the turn limit at 1,000 turns. Auto-battling the Hydra can easily take over an hour, so we're aiming to cut down the time by at least half an hour.
Yeah, I mean, I find their math kind of interesting. It's if they're adding the turn limit from 1,500 to 1,000 and hoping to cut an hour battle down to half an hour, and that doesn't quite work. But I'm sure there's other stuff they're going to change for that. But overall, this is mostly going to affect the ultra endgame teams that are just surviving to the end. You're going to mean focusing on actually just doing damage quickly. I don't think it's going to hurt a lot of people, and I think this is just going to shrink all the numbers down a little bit, but it's certainly not going to affect a lot of the earlier game teams or any teams for, honestly, about 70% of the people running. So, decent change. Honestly, it's a good time-saving change, too, so I can't complain about this one.
You'll now need to build teams that do damage faster, rather than teams built for a war of attrition. With a few adjustments, you'll have no problem reaching the damage numbers needed to get your usual rewards. Moving on, we're changing how the Serpent's Will buff works. Most importantly, and brace yourselves folks, it now reduces damage by 100% for a newly grown Hydra head. Yep, you read that right. Complete damage reduction.
That sounds bad.
You won't be able to nuke a newly grown head straight out of the gate anymore. Hold on though, there's good news too. If two heads regrow at the same time, only one of them will get the Serpent's Will buff. Champions have gotten stronger since the Hydra initially reared its heads. What with Awakening, Empowerment, and mythical champions joining the fray. We were seeing Hydra heads nuked as soon as they rejoined the battle, even with the 75% damage reduction. So, to make the fight even, and bring back some of the challenge that's been lost due to the game's evolution, the Hydra is getting a little stronger too.
All right. So, as you can see here, there's still two Serpent's Wills out there. So you can get multiple Serpent Wills out there. You just can't get more than one out at a time if multiple heads regrow. And we'll certainly see more on how multiple heads could regrow later. I'm not a huge fan of this change just because I still think it's possible for you to get up to 4 of these at a time, possibly. It'd be kind of unlucky, but it could happen. And if you're controlling the Hydra heads pretty well, it really will slog out and you'll lose a lot of turns just basically doing absolutely nothing. I think they would have been better off doing something to cap the amount of damage that a Hydra head under the Will of the Serpent could actually take, for example. So maybe cap it at 10% or 20% or something like that per hit. So there's a chance you still could kill one before it comes off, but it would be a much harder and sloggier task to do. But I kind of get it. It also is going to force the issue of the Hydra heads will be taking turns, so things will advance, so champions will get devoured, and things will move on. So let's take a look at the rest of this. Maybe this won't be the worst change. I'm not a huge fan of it. It is definitely going to drop the damage that everyone does in every scenario, although it's not going to drop some of the earlier game ones by quite a bit, so we'll see.
We're also making changes to digestion and devouring. You know how late on in the battle your champions start getting digested on a 2-turn countdown? Well, for every subsequent time they get digested after that first 2-turn countdown, the damage you'll need to do to free your champion increases. Like with Serpent's Will, digestion and devouring lost much of its intended challenge over time as more powerful champions and features were introduced.
That's a pretty big bar compared to where it was beforehand too. So I don't know if it's not doubling every time or just adding an extra iteration of it. It is increasing by a decent amount, though. Again, I don't see this one being a huge issue for most people because most people are not getting to the 5th Devour on the 2-turn cooldown, because that's Devour number 10, I think, maybe 12. It's pretty far down the chain of chances you are to get devoured. I have had teams where I've survived 200 turns where I'm getting devoured every other turn, or I'm even having multiple champs being devoured, and I'm able to free them pretty quickly, at least on like hard, I think, on one of my teams. Yeah, I get that one. I don't think it's a horrible change. I think it will definitely make devouring more of an issue. I like this a lot better than the no damage to Will of the Serpent champions. And to be fair, you're never going to run into an issue where Will of the Serpent's on somebody that's devoured something, because it just can't happen that way. You need to take a turn to devour somebody, and when you take the turn, when you devour them, you lose the Will of the Serpent. So there's never going to be a case where you cannot damage the head because they're devouring somebody, at least because of Will of the Serpent. Obviously, they could have Poison Cloud on them. They could have other stuff on them as well. So there's other ways that could be problematic that you're probably already familiar with it, but you're never going to have Will of the Serpent on one that's devouring. So this is fine.
It was always meant to be one of the Hydra's key mechanics and an ever-present threat, but it became really easy to rescue allies that were being digested. So, we're bringing that fear back into digestion. Taunts won't help anymore either. The Hydra has shed its thin skin, and petty insults will no longer distract it from a delicious champion meal sat right in front of it. In short, once a champion receives the mark of the Hydra debuff, they become public enemy number 1, and Taunt isn't going to do anything about it.
I'm mostly fine with this. Taunt was being used as a mechanic to prevent the digestion of champions, because the digestion action was subject to the taunt. So anyone that would try to digest somebody couldn't target the champion that needed to be digested, so they would then do normal stuff instead. The problem is taunt doesn't work against all of the Hydra attacks, because some of the Hydra attacks target specific people or specific champions regardless of taunts or provokes or anything like that. So I think that taunt needs a slight buff to be useful, because right now I don't think taunt really has a good place, other than taunt is still a buff that is hard to replicate, making it easier to use taunt as one of the skills to make your mischief tanks stand out a little further. So I think taunt champions are still going to be useful for mischief tanks, but they no longer are going to help with the digestion, which is a little annoying. I really wish that they would do something with taunt to make it work like provoke. Or maybe they need to introduce another head where taunt is a controlling mechanic for that head as well. We'll see. I do think that that's going to be a pretty big hit to taunt, and taunt is already kind of a marginal ability useful mostly in Shogun. And even in Shogun, it's not always the most useful one. So we'll see. There's so many enemies that ignore taunt that I haven't seen taunt be a really big thing. I guess in Arena, it's kind of okay. So I still would like to see taunt expanded on a little bit.
Taunt is a cool mechanic, but new champion combinations emerged that could totally negate the mark of the Hydra. Less cool. It's not all bad news, though. Your team's AI will now prioritize attacking the head that is digesting when you're running in auto battle mode. Teamwork makes the dream work. Exposed necks are also getting a rework. From now on, exposed necks will have a set HP value that is double the original head's HP. Once that value reaches 0, the head will immediately regrow. With constantly regrowing Hydra heads, you'll need to think on your feet and have tactics in place for all potential scenarios.
That's an interesting change. Again, I don't see that change affecting a lot of the early and mid-game Hydra teams. So if you're barely one keying normal or barely one keying hard, I don't think that's going to make a huge difference, because you're rarely in a turn or two of the Hydra head going to be burning through that much HP. That is a direct target against the Trunda teams, the Wixwell Yenica teams, or any team that is based on just doing tons upon tons upon tons of damage to a severed head. And it basically means that once you drop a big nuke on a severed head, that severed head is no longer a severed head, which is fine. I don't think that's necessarily a bad approach to take. How much damage that's really going to nerf, I don't know, but I don't see that hitting a lot of the teams that are struggling to get to some of the top chests in Hydra. I think that's going to hit more on the teams that are doing the billions upon billions of damage. So, again, not bad.
Oh, man, Hydra battles are about to get much tougher. But the changes don't stop there. We've got a few more lined up to help keep things balanced, starting with shields.
Careful here.
Shields will now receive a cap of 1 million points. This cap is separate for shields placed by artifacts and shields placed by skills, though. So you could get up to 2 million points of shield. These caps...
Why not 1 billion? Like the reference they made there. That's hilarious. This is fine. You're still going to be able to get an infinite shield Wixwell team working in regular clan boss. You can still actually probably do an infinite shield team in Hydra and be somewhat effective. Obviously, you're going to be struggling with getting digested a little more often, as I mentioned in some of these other buffs. But 1 million or even 2 million against the clan boss is going to get you to turn 100-ish. Because around turn 100, the clan boss starts smacking for around 1 million. I don't know exactly when it is, but that's fine. I don't see that as a major issue, because by the time you're at turn 100 on the regular clan boss, you've one-keyed Ultra Nightmare. So don't worry, your Wixwell Infinite comp teams are safe. You might lose some damage, but you're still going to one-key. I don't see that as being a big deal. I think this is a pretty solid fix.
Are still big enough to ensure powerful builds remain viable for taking on the Demon Lord and the Hydra, but they'll not be as game-breaking as before. And lastly, we come to everyone's favorite Dwarven warrior herself, Trunda Guilt Mallet.
This will be fun, because this is definitely going to test how people react to nerfs. Even if they say it's not a nerf, it's definitely going to be a nerf for her in Hydra, because she's not going to be doing ridiculous damage, although as you can see, a lot of this stuff has already been targeted against teams that use her in general. We'll see. Hopefully this is interesting.
Don't worry, we're not nerfing her into oblivion. We're just rebalancing some of her skills to keep her damage numbers in Hydra battles more reasonable. Starting with her default skill, Golden Mallet, Trunda will now have a 50% chance to place a stun debuff on both hits.
That is actually interesting for PvE. I think that's actually going to be cool for PvE, because it means you guys got some control if you get some accuracy on her. I know a lot of people do not like accuracy on her for her A3, which only does the second hit if you don't have a stun out there. But it'll give her some interesting use cases in PvE with accuracy, and it'll also, unfortunately, give her a better chance of getting sheeped. So, yeah, I don't know if that's really going to help her in Arena. In fact, that may hurt her a bit, because sheep is a thing in Arena. Polarium still doesn't seem to understand that sheep is a thing in Arena and how bad sheep is in Arena, but we'll see.
A little upgrade, but a neat one for PvP. Trunda's second skill, Cloak of Ages, will now ignore 50% of each target's defense on her second hit. However, the caveat...
Yep. Second hit is always normal. Okay, so there's the caveat on that. In fact,
here is that it will only ever be a normal hit.
Okay, so let's go back to that. Here's the problem that her skill had beforehand. Is it would attack one enemy, and then the second hit would deal 60% of the damage inflicted with the first hit. So she would attack, she would crit, she'd do her 300 crit damage, and then she would attack, and then she would crit again. So she would do additional 300% crit damage on top of the 60%, on top of the doubling from the severed head, on top of the increased damage from weaken, which will still be applied twice, by the way, on top of the fact that it's ignoring defense because she's got Helm Smasher or other stuff in there as well. This was where the wild swings in damage came from, and this is why Trunda was so broken in Hydra, is multiple severed heads meant that she hit for a massive amount of damage on this ability. I did 20, 30, 50 million in a single hit with this skill, and I didn't have a great Trunda. So this is where this is pretty much where they're aiming to fix her. This is going to be a huge nerf for the Trunda teams, but the Trunda teams were doing hundreds of billions of damage. And they were so much head and shoulders above the Wixwell teams and the Yannicka teams and some of the other cheese teams that they needed to be addressed. And this will address it. Meanwhile, ignoring 50% of defense means that she's doing almost true damage on this to everybody else in the secondary hits, which means that it's still going to smack. 60%. It can still get weaken bonuses. And since it's ignoring defense, it may actually still do more damage than the first hit because it's doing effectively almost true damage. 50% plus your 25% from Savage, plus your chance to get Helm Smasher in there, plus other bonuses you might have as well. Obviously, you can't break 100% ignore defense. Yeah, that I think that'll do it. I think that is a good fix without breaking her in other areas of the game.
Here is that it will only ever be a normal hit. It's still big damage, but it won't be quite as astronomical as they have been before. Forge Rhythm, Trunda's third skill, now places consistent HP burn debuffs, and both hits from this skill.
So it's got the stun chance, which if she has accuracy, has a chance to stun. Obviously not a problem against Hydra, but that is one of the reasons you didn't build her with accuracy in the arena. And in fact, Trunda was so much of an arena meta that people that had Trunda would intentionally not build up accuracy in their Great Hall on Magic champions, specifically to not land stun with Trunda in arena. Now, there's so many other ways to get bonus stats now that that's really never not been a thing anymore. But it is definitely a concern. And now with Sheep, it's an issue. The Sheep also applies the HP burn, but now she places the HP burn. So I think in Hydra, it might be worth actually building her with some accuracy to get that extra HP burn damage. Ideally, you're kind of hoping that she's popping heads so the burn isn't processing too much. But you know what? Burn is nice. Plus, it actually helps you hit through the poison cloud. So getting extra burns out there is not too bad. 50% more damage against Stone Skin. I don't know if that's going to be a meta skill or not because there's so much damage reduction with Stone Skin. But it could be interesting. And to be fair, the Stone Skin piercing blessing, not seeing a lot of use, but wasn't as useless as I thought it was going to be. So maybe this will be useful in arena. And burns are good against Stone Skin too. So maybe she's a little more anti-Stone Skin with that skill. Well, we'll see.
Hits from this skill deal 50% more damage to enemies under a Stone Skin shield. Another neat boost to her overall kit. And finally, her passive skill now increases Trunda's attack by 5% for each stun or HP burn debuff she places on enemies. Her speed will still...
Yeah, he reads this wrong, which is pretty funny. 10% attack increase up to 50% for each stun or HP burn. You want to build the accuracy now. You just do. That is going to be huge, and that's going to help bring the damage back up a bit because she's effectively getting a 50% damage boost just from the extra attack that she's going to get on all of her skills. So that's pretty amazing. And then the speed increasing with HP burn and stun means she's more likely to get around to do another turn again. That's always good. Extra turns on your team means less turns for the Hydra, means more heads you're popping, means more damage you're doing. So actually pretty decent. Overall, I like the kit. It still looks like she's going to be a good Hydra damage dealer. It still looks like she'll still be relevant in other content. It looks like she's going to get a bit of a nerf from the ultra damage she was using with her Cloak of Aegis. But I think overall, it's not a bad rework. People are going to be upset about it, however, because people have invested in these huge mega damage Hydra teams. But I think a lot of people understand how toxic these things were. And I'm hoping that the general sentiment is that some of these changes they made so far will head in the right direction and make Hydra better for everyone. Will they? I don't know. This is still Polarium, and their ability to actually implement some of these things and how they'll work, I don't know. Again, I don't like all of these things, but let's see if there's anything else.
Still be increased as well, both by stun and HP burn debuffs. All in all, Trundle isn't going anywhere. We still expect her to be an excellent choice for Hydra battles and the arena. We tested a ton of early, mid, and late game champion rosters and team compositions when making these changes. Our results showed things will get better.
Just to put this up here, this is a Nightmare team. Notice this only ran for 10 minutes. Now it looks like everyone died after 10 minutes, but a 10-minute team that does 279 million, still pretty decent. Trunda still doing a ton of damage. Obviously, I think this Yumiko reset team is not going to be as meta as it used to be because you don't need to reset Trunda quite as much as you used to because some of her damage can now come from burns and from that first ability as well. It's better.
Still be able to earn Hydra chests and milestone rewards in Hydra Clash. And you'll spend less time fighting the Hydra each week. As always, we'll be keeping an eye on your feedback and monitoring game data to see how these changes affect Hydra battles overall. We hope this preview has been useful for you and will help you prepare for more battles against the Hydra.
That was interesting. I just caught that.
Overall, we hope this preview has been
There
useful.
we go. This is a severed head that's going to get Reaper on it. So that's interesting. That means Reaper has more uses in there. It also means that Reaper could finish off a severed head and kick a head back into life again. I don't know if that means you actually don't want to take Soul Reaper in Hydra anymore, because I don't know if you really want to be killing these heads early. We'll see. Definitely interesting. But it looks like that's them wrapping it up. And so I'm going to wrap up this video as well. Appreciate you guys hanging out. What do you think of all this stuff? I think that Polarium has actually mostly hit the mark. I think there's a few things that they could have done a little bit better. I'm hoping that if this is well received and the Trunda fix / nerf goes over well, maybe they'll start looking at other champion Armands and that need some nerfs, and looking at re-examining a few other champions as well, because they really do need to nerf a couple of champions. It is no fun when a single champion can ruin an experience for you. And it's no fun when a single champion is so powerful that they are so needed in your team and somebody's going to pick one every time and they're almost your number one ban every time, you know, speaking live arena. Obviously, this Hydra stuff, I think this Hydra stuff's going to make this a lot less toxic. You're still going to have people that do billions of damage. That's just going to happen. But you're not going to have people doing 60 billion, 100 billion. And overall, I think it's going to make Hydra a little more fun, because I also think it's going to speed it up a little bit. So, amen to that. Appreciate your comments. Leave some thoughts down below. You know, hit that like, hit that subscribe button, smash that if you want. I appreciate it. You guys are awesome. And until the next video, I'm Bront CatHerder.